The American Legion has supported scouting since our organization's founding in 1919. American Legion posts sponsor thousands of scouting units serving more than 60,000 young people nationwide. The Chief Scout Executive earned a degree in Youth Agency Administration from Salem College in West Virginia. As the Boy Scouts of America's top professional, he supports the work of its National Executive Board and works directly with the National President, Robert Gates, and National Commissioner Tico Perez. He is the Scouting's equivalent of a Chief Executive Officer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Chief Scout Executive of the Boy Scouts of America, Mike Surbaugh. Thank you, Mike. Move that out of your way.
Good morning. How many people in the audience, by a show of hands, had one of their children in our program or was a scout yourself? Okay, almost everybody in the room. Well, at Scouts, that was truly pathetic. Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope that we have a few minutes to talk about something today that may be a departure from your busy agenda. I want to talk about some concepts of things that I think are happening with children and in education that both of us have primary concern over. And we have a long partnership and a rich and storied history together. And first, let me say thank you individually to you for your service, and thank you for the incredible partnership that Scouting has had with the American Legion. At your first National Congress in 1919, you endorsed the Boy Scouts of America. For almost 100 years, we've been partners and we've been servants to our nation's youth. We've seen lives transformed. We've seen leadership developed. We've done it together for almost a century. And today, when boys have a chance to earn the Outstanding Eagle Scout Award from the American Legion and receive a scholarship, when over 60,000 young people every week go to a Legion to participate in scouting, we've done something truly magnificent. And I think part of the reason that that partnership has lasted so long is because the foundational elements of both the Legion and Scouting start with some very simple but very impactful words. When a boy holds his hand up like this and says, "On my honor, I will do my duty to God and my country," there's 40 words that start to shape values and start to impact something that the Legion has always stood for, and that's character. When Scouts say words like trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, and the other points of the Scout oath and law, they start to internalize a value structure that leads to character development. And I think you could say that one could be an effective leader without good character, but it's probably not a leader that any of us would want to follow. And what Scouting and the Legion imparts through educational efforts in children is that the fundamental character competencies give you everything that you need to be an effective leader for the rest of your life. Now, that word character has always kind of fascinated me. I think I heard it first when I came back from my first Boy Scout campout. And like many of you, when you have children that come home, you always ask them, "How did it go?" And my mom and dad looked at me and said, "Well, how was the campout?" I said, "Well, we had backpacks on and it was a long hike and it rained. And we got wet. And then we got muddy. And we pitched our tents, and my best friend Don had the great idea that we're going to pitch our tent on a hill so that the water would run down through the floor. Well, our tent didn't have a floor on it, and so in the middle of the night, we rolled out of the tent, and it rained again, and we got wetter. And the next morning, we were preparing our breakfast around the fire, and my former best friend, Don, kicked the eggs and the bacon into the fire, and we didn't have any breakfast. And then we hiked, and it rained again, and we got wetter, and now I'm home. And my dad looked at me, and he said, "That builds character." I wasn't sure I wanted any more of that. You know, it was a little scary. And throughout my life, I've heard that word bandied about. You know, what is character? Probably each of us would frame it a little bit differently, but most would agree we know it when we see it. It's something you can feel. And I think that that's where we're at as a society today, is we're recognizing that there's a growing character deficit in children. Because children have different pressures and stressors than many of us did. Now, picture a time 50 years ago what the youth landscape looked like. There were a limited number of activities in each town. You might have Little League, you might have Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts or Campfire, you might have Pee Wee football, but there wasn't the range of options available to children. So what tended to happen on Saturday morning, Mom or Dad would send the kid out on his or her bike and say, "Be home for dinner." And a lot of things happened during the day. Some good, maybe some not so good, but there were a number of things that happened internally with young people because they were forced to create and develop their own play. They developed structures of leadership. They learned the fundamentals of how to work with one another and be engaged in a positive activity. And then they were often connected with a positive youth development organization. Perhaps it was scouting, it could be 4-H, it could be YMCA, but there were things that we now know in those curriculums that lead to character. Now, that's been studied heavily the last 10 years, and what we find is that character competencies and character attributes, they're actually formed at a much lower age level than we had always thought. Grades 1 through 5 are the prime times for character development. And I think why that's important and why we have to give that some thought with our children and grandchildren is you see what tends to occur today. We have fewer children participating in positive youth development activities at the teenage years. And while this hasn't been studied, what I think tends to happen is that if you picture the sports pyramid, it gets pretty narrow at the top. Only about 25% of kids in America will have a chance to compete at the varsity level. Now, most varsity athletes that I meet are great kids. They have some other peer associations that occur. They tend to be the popular kids. They do things that are positive. They tend to be involved at a higher degree in church activities. They have less free time to do things that may not lead to character development. But what I think is happening is that there's such a huge emphasis now on youth sports that kids are in highly choreographed adult-led activities at younger and younger ages, which is good. We know that sports, coupled with a positive youth development activity like scouting, is a powerful force in bringing children up. But what I think is happening is that parents, as they start to get stressed and they have all those activities, they sit around the kitchen table and they say, you know, we can't do everything. Maybe you have to drop out of 4-H or the YMCA because the sports has become so competitive. Well, here's what I think happens next. At age 12 or 13, when they start dropping out of those organized adult-led sporting activities, they haven't learned the internal structures of how to create play in an effective way. They haven't learned peer leadership. And what we know about adolescent young men and women is that they tend not to join at that age a positive activity like YMCA, scouting, 4-H. So I think they drop off that sports pyramid. Now here's what's different. We can occupy every spare minute of a 12-year-old's time like this. We have a technology element that's been inserted into childhood that's taking time like never before. So what concerns me greatly as a nation, if we don't emphasize that parents have to get kids connected with activities that build character, we won't have the leaders of the future. The American Legion has helped do that for almost 100 years, and today it's more important than ever to continue and build that partnership. Scouting has had its share of controversy over the past few years, but we're in a great place right now. Our membership nationwide is growing exponentially. People are on fire for Scouting, and I think the real underlying current is that parents recognize that character matters. On behalf of the Boy Scouts of America, I give you my sincerest thanks for this true partnership in service to our nation's youth and building character and leaders for the future. Thank you.
Sir, as an ex-scout myself, the father of a scout, I want to present to you my medallion, our medallion from the American Legion. Of course, you hit on it in your comments. An organization for God and country, and a strong partnership with Boy Scouts of America from 1919 on. Thank you, sir, for your service.
Thank you,
and
Commander.
thank you for what you're doing for the youth of America.
Thank you,
you,
Commander.
sir.